So let's kind of wrap up at the second half of our episode and kind of like looking ahead to the summer. How are you feeling kind of just sort of like gazing on the summer movie calendar? Because I took a look a couple nights ago and my I I don't feel like terrible. If anything, I kind of walked away with like a very objective sort of like, well, at least we won't be talking about the same thing every week on this show.
Right. But it did kind of make me laugh that we're like, oh my gosh, this cool, unique, creative. So next week is Thunderbolts.
Yeah. Which I don't really like to like, because I'm trying to be more of a critic now where I'm
same.
like, everyone, if a movie really clicks with you, good for you. I don't want to bully people but like, I kind of did like groan a little bit and chuckle to myself when the first Thunderbolts reactions were coming out. And it was all people being like, finally, the first Marvel movie to tackle America's mental health epidemic. And me being like, oh my God, that sounds insufferable to me.
Not only that, but like Iron Man 3 was all about PTSD.
Right. And also being like, I don't buy that. I think if that's your takeaway, then like it's time for you to get a Criterion Channel subscription. You know what I mean?
And I, as somebody who really does try to go in, like you said, I try to give every movie the benefit of the doubt. Nobody wants to go in saying like, well, I bet the next 2 hours of my life are going to be a waste. Like, nobody wants to feel that way.
Yeah.
But everything I've seen about the movie, despite the fact that I love Florence Pugh, I love Academy Award nominee Sebastian Stan.
Yeah.
Going back to
love Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Yeah,
but
the
everyone in that cast,
great.
I love. I don't know about you. My hesitation with that, and this kind of like can get into like the first little inklings of our summer movie conversation.
Yeah,
this is really like one of 3 big comic book movies. Like I can feel that like in the last couple of years we've gotten a lot of like big comic book movie bombs. I don't know if this is like this is going to be a real test year. I think Thunderbolts is sort of void at this point. Like whether good or bad, it seems like Marvel is trying to market it as like, it's not a Marvel movie, guys.
It's an A24 movie. Yeah.
Right. And like, I don't know how much of that is sort of like a fun troll versus on the like cult of A24 versus like Marvel seriously being like, we're in a bit of a brand crisis at the moment. And this is more kind of like in line with the kind of movies that we've been making in the last 5 years. And we just need to sell it as something else to get people to see it.
Whereas, I don't think it's an accident that the trailer that came out before Anthony Mackie Captain America and the trailer after Anthony Mackie Captain America are so different.
Yeah, there's just something kind of confusing about the marketing. Like, I think the last day I was in Greece, they switched all of the Minecraft posters to Thunderbolts posters, and someone in my friend group was like, why is it a Wheaties box? And I like couldn't explain to them like why. I was like, I don't know. I think it's obviously trying to be funny, but like I don't get what the joke is
or who the joke is for.
Right. But like, so if that movie just sort of seems like, write off, for lack of a better word, of just sort of like it'll be what it is.
Yeah.
Like it
feels like they're already pivoting towards Fantastic Four already.
That's what I was gonna say, is like that feels like the one that Marvel and Disney are like, we need to put all of our energy into this, and of like, if this works, we're covered for like the next several years. If this doesn't work, then we're in like real crisis mode, which I think is also the vibe going on with the Superman movie over at Warner Brothers. Is like, we've put a lot of chips down into like, here's round 2 of trying to do the Marvel thing, but with the DC characters, and maybe the James Gunn sauce is more tasteful for audiences than the Zack Snyder sauce was.
Which is interesting to me, like to connect the 2 films. Thunderbolts, to me, looks like Marvel trying to do Suicide Squad, which was a movie that didn't work twice for DC. Now, granted, the James Gunn version was way better, but
yes, that one I'll give of like, that was a pandemic
Yeah,
thing of like no
but
one went and saw that because that was during the pandemic.
but the fact that like you have a studio going, okay, let's do a version of a movie that audiences have already rejected twice, and do it from a studio that they already are feeling burnout on, feels
Hmm.
really concerning to me. And I feel like James Gunn, like you said, is in a similar spot where he's like, okay, I tried the Guardians formula with Suicide Squad and it didn't work. Was it the pandemic, like you're saying? And it feels like Superman is
Yeah.
real uh his first real, not crisis, but his first real sort of like challenge point that he's had in a really long time.
So let's kind of first start off with a question I want to ask you, which is like, what do you think is going to be? Let's start positive. What do you think is going to be the big movie phenomenon of the summer? Of like last summer, I think, it was undeniably, even though I like detest that movie with every bone in my body, like Deadpool and Wolverine, giant hit. I even feel like among just sort of like chit chatter with people, Twisters kind of became like the big thing last summer. What do you see as being kind of the big movie that's going to own summer 2025?
So part of me wonders if it's going to be something like Mission Impossible, which they have been really billing as an endgame style wrap up. And so I
Mm-hmm.
know audiences are really tired of never ending sequels. And so I wonder
Yeah.
if the sort of novelty of finality is going to drive them to make this Mission Impossible a success where the last one wasn't. Part
Mm-hmm.
of me wonders that, and then the other part of me wonders, like, is it something that we're not even thinking about, like a Lilo and Stitch or a How to Train Your Dragon?
Yeah,
Are we getting the
that's what I was
Minecraft thing
gonna.
again?
Yeah, I was maybe gonna answer this with like a conservative answer of like I think it'll either be because the other big hit of last summer was Inside Out 2. And I think there still is something of like children's movies in the summer are like that's a real slam dunk for
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood if they can figure out how to sell it. And I think you're probably right that the Lilo and Stitch movie and the How to Train Your Dragon movie, even though, live action adaptations of animated movies that, you know, at, we've lamented that issue like so many times on this podcast, but I still think there's those movies could be huge hits if for only then like we got to get the kids out of the house sort of thing. Or
Yeah,
like
and
my
not only
kid
that,
loves
but you've got
rewatching Lilo and Stitch. My kid loves rewatch. I mean, you have kids, you know how it is of like I wouldn't be surprised if I would love Mission Impossible to be huge. That's probably like the blockbuster I'm most looking forward to this summer. I don't think that movie will perform badly. I think has there been a Mission Impossible that has been like $1 billion phenomenon? Like they always do well. I think the last one like didn't do well, but only because it like costs so much, which
right.
could also be a case of I think like this new one is another like huge like $300 million mega budget movie. But I think there's good vibes for that franchise. I think I'm not worried for that movie, even if I don't know if it'll. I would love for it to be the phenomenon of the summer, but there is a little bit of me that's like, yeah, but those movies have never quite. They've never been like in-game levels phenomenal.
Right.
Like they've always been successful, but they weirdly do better overseas than they do here in the States, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And I feel like there may be some like added goodwill to this one because, for people like me with the previous one. Now, granted, this is the eighth one. Like the
Yeah.
burnout is real. But like even for the last one that came out, number 7, like I didn't like it. And I felt bad that I didn't like it. Like my response walking out of the theater is like, I'm really bummed that I didn't like that more. And so
I'm bummed for you because I
yeah,
had a
I
great
know.
time.
Yeah, and so I wonder if there's a lot of people like me movie who are going into 8 with like their fingers crossed, going like, "Come on, Tom, you can do it,"
Yeah,
But
that's another one that has like some interesting marketing, I will say, because like that there was a trailer played before Sinners, and I noticed that I wonder if they're hiding something. And not in a bad way, but it seemed like the trailer that played like right before Sinners was a lot of reused footage from the other Mission Impossible movies, and really leaning into like it all culminates to this.
Yeah.
And it made me wonder, like, surely like is there some like big crazy sequence that they're like not showing us? Or
I think so. I think they learned their lesson in the last movie where they made the big like motorcycle jump.
yeah.
That was the climax of the movie, like the heart of all the advertising, so that by the time it finally happened, we're like, we saw this a lot already.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that they would want to hide something. So you've got that aspect. And to go back to what you were saying about kids' movies, not only is it we've got to get kids out of the house, it's think about all of these day camps that kids are going to be in, where all of these schools need field trips. And
Spoken like a true teacher here.
Yeah, and you're also talking about, like, we're talking about Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon as relatively modern movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Lilo and Stitch came out in the early 2000s. So the kids who watch that are now adults with their own kids.
That is
How to
true.
Train Your Dragon is the first movie I watched at home on DVD after my daughter was born. Like a couple days after she came home from the hospital, she was taking a nap. I'm watching How to Train Your Dragon. So like the kids who were barely here when that movie came out can almost drive now.
Yeah.
So you're seeing
which is a big part to the Minecraft success.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
Think is,
and so,
you know, a generation of kids that grew up with that, playing that game.
And so you've got to think about how, to age myself, is this going to be their version of Michael Keaton Batman? This thing where it's the first time I get to see a, quote, real version of this on the screen. And we'll see. But I think that those are sort of like kind of hidden time bombs that could upend everybody's predictions. Like, it could be a thing where, they do solid business and it makes shareholders happy, or it could be a thing where we're like, oh my God, where did this come from?
Yeah. So what's a movie, maybe to get a little darker, what's a movie that you think will be the big bust of the summer that maybe people don't see coming, but that you're getting some weird vibes from? Should I just drop my hot take right here?
Yeah, I've got a couple that I'm trying to narrow it down, so you drop your hot take and then we'll see if we're on the same page.
For the sake of content, I'm going to say Superman.
Yeah.
In general, we talked about that compared to Fantastic Four. I will say I'm sensing some genuine excitement among people for Fantastic Four. Does that mean it's going to be good? I don't know, but I think people love that cast, and I think there's an excitement of people being like, Marvel hasn't adapted this major comic yet. Like, there's been Fantastic Four movies prior, but like no one really likes them. And this being a sort of like, oh, okay, can we finally get like there seems to be a sense of people being like, okay, maybe they've like actually nailed down what works about those comic book characters in a movie. And compared that to Superman, where I feel like among just the normal people in my life, I think there's a bit of skepticism about Superman. And I don't think it's this sort of like Snyder bro, stuck up attitude of like, not
let's
my
review-
Superman. Where's Henry Cavill? I think
let's review bomb this on Rotten Tomatoes.
No,
kind of
I think it's genuinely a like, it hasn't been that long in the grand scheme of things since we got a version of Superman, and I will say, if you look back at the box office for a lot of the Superman movies, Superman, while a very big character, is not always like box office like gold. You know what I mean? Like, the Superman movies, I think there's sort of a mixed feeling about them, and I can sense a little bit of people being like, didn't we just reboot Superman? That like, even though you could say like, well, the Henry Cavill Man of Steel, like that was 2012, 2013, whenever that was, it feels recent for people. And I could see a little bit of hesitation in being like, are people going to jump on board to like, I now have to fully memorize like another franchise comic book world? Like, I wonder if this is coming just a little bit too late for DC and Warner Brothers, and whether that's the thing that people are interested in hopping on again, of like, look, the Marvel movies, they're not all perfect, but like, did that they just luck out of being like, they were first up to bat, and most of them for a good 10 years were at least like solidly fun, and that, they captured that moment, but now people are sort of burnt out on that thing. And now here's Warner Brothers coming along being like, here's our second attempt at doing this, and aren't you excited? And I'm just getting a lot of kind of like, even though I hope that movie's good, maybe it'll be fun. I like James Gunn, but I don't know about you. I am sensing a bit of hesitation with people of being just sort of like, I don't know that I need another Superman movie. Like, I think I'm good. I get it, and like, it doesn't feel like it's been that long since the last time we like rebooted Superman.
I could see that, especially since you have the, not that it was like a ratings juggernaut or anything, but you have the Superman and Lois show that just wrapped up on
That's
TV,
true.
which a lot of genre fans consider one of the best versions of Superman that there's been, which granted almost nobody watched. But so if you have this hardcore Superman contingency that's like, yeah, we just saw it wrap up in a really good way. We've seen it done even more recently than the Henry Cavill. Then you've got your core demo of people going, you know what? I think we're good for a while. So you could have some danger from both directions.
Superman content that then now Warner Brothers saying like, and here's another one, but we're starting from the beginning. Are people just going to be like, as you said, like, I'm good. I've seen so many versions of Superman in the last several years. And if you look back at the box office, like, I think the highest grossing Superman movie, it's Batman versus Superman. Like, it's the one that also had Batman in there for the marketing, and of like, Man of Steel, I remember that coming out and people being like, that's going to just own the summer. And it came out and it did pretty well, but it wasn't like, it didn't own the summer. And I remember a similar feeling when, what's the Bryan Singer one, when that came out, of people just being like,
Superman Returns.
That's just going to be like, it's Superman. It's just going to like wipe the floor clean and just obliterate everything else around it. And it kind of didn't. And
when you have to remember too, like, even, I say OG Superman, like, let's say like sort of modern era Superman, even the Christopher Reeve Superman.
Christopher Reeve ones, yeah.
You go back and like, the only one of those four to really do truly great was the first one.
Yeah,
I know,
and it was because it was like,
it's
the first time Superman has been in a movie.
And if you go back and watch it now, I love Christopher Reeve. I love Christopher Reeve as Superman. The movie itself is really bloated.
Oh.
Christopher Reeve doesn't show up until an hour in, and so
I'm gonna rewatch all of those. That's gonna be my project before the James Gunn one comes out, because I've truthfully only ever seen the first two Christopher Reeve ones, and I haven't seen them since I was a kid. Like, I watched them like once on TV and was like, fun. I like Superman, and then I've like never revisited them as an adult.
Yeah, and they're perfectly solid movies. I don't want it to feel like I'm killing Santa Claus here or anything, but but I think people now who go back and rewatch those original Superman movies are gonna find them like quaint and dated, even though at the time we're like, I mean, the tagline was like, you will believe a man can fly, which we're like, now we're like, that's every movie, so I think a lot of it is having to, if you do go back and revisit it, it's trying to watch it through those 70s goggles, not like your 2025 lenses, to see why it was such a big deal. But I think Superman has had a traditionally tricky time at the box office. So that wouldn't surprise me at all if you end up being right about this one.
Are there any others that you're sensing kind of a little bit of like, I don't know that this will work, and I want to preface again, like, I hope Superman's good. Like, I would love nothing more than like a kick-ass Superman movie, but that seems like a movie that costs a lot and is like Warner Brothers has a lot riding on it.
Yeah.
And I'm just not sensing from even non-movie snob people like us, like just generic people in my life, I'm not sensing a whole lot of like, oh, I can't wait for Superman to come out.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm hearing a lot of like, didn't that just come out? And you're like, well, no, we've had multiple Batman in that time. We've had multiple Spider-Man in that time. But yeah, it does feel like, yeah, we just had this, even though that's not the case. So I've got a couple, and
Okay.
from a selfish aspect, and this sounds evil, right? Um, I could see it being the new Jurassic World movie.
Interesting.
And part of it is just because I'm like, we need to leave this alone for a little while. And I know
It's
Universal's not going to do
really
that.
feeling like the leftovers from like 3 weeks
Yeah.
ago that we're just like reheating.
Yeah, and and I know Universal is like, well, we're not going to leave money on the table. Like even though the last three were garbage, they still made billions of dollars. We're not just going to walk away from that. But for people who like creative storytelling, um, it just feels like you said, you're just like rewarming the same bowl of soup over and
Yeah.
over and over again. Even though, Wicked made me a big fan of Jonathan Bailey.
Hmm.
Love Mahershala Ali. Scarlett Johansson, hit or miss these days. But uh, everything about this movie just screams paycheck movie to me, or let's check this off the list. And
Yeah.
even the trailers are sort of making fun of the premise, where Mahershala Ali is like, it's like, yeah, nobody patrols these islands because nobody's dumb enough to go. And it's like, yeah, but guess who's gonna be? Like, and so from a creativity standpoint, something tells me that one might underperform. But I don't know. Same thing with kids. Never underestimate the power of like 12-year-old boys and
Yeah.
dinosaurs.
Nothing travels and sells across the globe like it's dinosaurs.
Yeah,
And as
and
I'm with you, I kind of like am so done with the Jurassic movies. I even like on the plane ride back from Greece, like fired up the first one and was just like, oh my god, this is so good. Like none of the
yeah.
other movies can touch this.
Oh, I was gonna
But
say,
like,
we're seven movies into a franchise where there's only been one genuinely good movie.
yeah, but even still, like all of the Jurassic Park movies, every time one comes out, it's a huge hit, and it gets back to that thing of just like dinosaurs. It
Yeah,
sells.
dinosaur eat people, that cool,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's that primal thing. But so there's that one. The one that just from a pure mathematical, like facts and figure standpoint, the one thing that I just cannot see being successful is F1.
that's the other one other than Superman that I'm sort of like I'm really excited for that movie, but that also that feels like another big gamble movie of Apple being like, can we generate another Top Gun Maverick in like let's get the same director. It's instead of we strap cameras to fighter jets, it's we strap cameras to race cars. We can't get Tom Cruise, who's another kind of like veteran,
hmm
sturdy movie star who we can get Brad Pitt, throw him in there, and let's see if we can recreate the
Yeah,
magic. And it looks awesome, but
yeah.
can it?
I will be there to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, like a very, very expensive movie that
This is 300
can,
million plus, right?
yeah, that can you regenerate the Top Gun Maverick phenomenon, or is that just a sort of like it was the right combination of a movie that like a sequel to a movie that there was the right amount of nostalgia for,
hmm
plus it was like right as people were comfortable going back to the movies after the pandemic, and like is it going to just be like you can't that was just a sort of like perfect circumstances for that movie to
Yeah,
become a
yeah,
phenomenon, regardless of like how good the F1 movie might be.
yeah. I think everything you just said is yes. Like, I think Top Gun Maverick was a perfect storm. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot. Like, even looking at the trailer for F1, it made me think, was this supposed to be the was this supposed to be Days of Thunder,
Hmm.
Maverick?
Yeah.
Because even back in the day, Days of Thunder, they're like, it's Top Gun with race cars,
You're
you
right.
know,
Exactly.
and
That's a perfect
and
comp, actually.
yeah, and so what they were like, was did this start? It's sort of like the Pit and ER, right? Did this
Hmm.
start as a Days of Thunder Maverick? But then Tom Cruise was like, "Nah, I want to finish up Mission Impossible," so they just retrofitted it to be, Brad Pitt as an older, washed up race guy who has to train the hot-headed young
Yeah.
phenom, and then you have like Javier Bardem as like seems kind of like the Iceman guy, and
Right.
so
Or
it just
in the John Hamm role is like, I'm gonna be
yeah
the boss person that's just gonna like roll my eyes and be like,
yeah
darn you.
I'm I'm here to ruin the fun, so it feels like it's hitting all the same beats, which those are successful beats. Who knows,
Hmm.
there's a reason tropes work, but is it going to work to overcome this significant budget? And I know that for most people, that should, and even for us, that should not be the things going on in our head when we sit down to
No.
watch a movie. But, it just feels like all the math is working against this one. Does that mean I want it to bomb? No, I never want anything to bomb. Like, unless it's just something that if it bombs, it sort of like kills off something that's
It
destroying creativity,
it is genuinely one of the blockbusters this summer I'm most looking forward to,
Yeah,
and the trailer looks sick. Of just sort of like they put cameras on race cars, like
yeah.
like I'm there.
And it's also like, is this the first full blown movie star performance we've gotten from Brad Pitt since Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? I know we had
Oh,
Wolf's,
true.
but that felt like it. And Wolf's
That
was solid. It was fine,
Get
but
out of here. That
yeah.
that movie was like a Nespresso commercial. I like detested that movie.
But I mean, I sat there for 2 hours and I was like, "Yep, they're good looking and charismatic," which is what they
Yeah.
were going for,
Yeah.
But I feel like this may be the first chance Brad Pitt gets to be Brad Pitt since Once
Yeah.
Upon a Time in Hollywood. So we'll see if he still has that magnetism.
Well, I wish we had extra time that I could just talk with you about the pit because I'm really enjoying it. It's like one of the
It's
best
so
things It's so
I'm
good.
I'm so far behind on TV, and me and my wife never watch TV together anymore, just because our tastes have evolved to be different. And
Uh-huh.
that's the one that we're sitting down to watch together, and it's really hard not to binge it. Like
Oh, see,
we're on
it's
episode
it's
10
it's
now.
become my like comfort food binge show because like I don't know all the medical stuff they're talking about, so
Yeah,
I could just sort of like have it on in the background as I'm cooking and stuff. But it is funny how much it is just sort of like, oh, it's ER, like it's all
yeah.
come full circle at this point.
So
But
much so that
it's
there's
so
lawsuits,
good.
right? But yeah, it's
Yeah.
something that like we get a chance to do together, so we're trying to stretch it out and make it last. And yeah, and I think it speaks to this era we're in, where it's like, oh, smart people doing things competently. Yes, please, we
Yes.
need that.
So the last question regarding summer movies is, what do you think will be kind of the surprise of the summer?
Hmm. I'm hoping, again, if we're being selfish, I'm
Yeah.
hoping it's Life of Chuck.
Interesting. Yeah,
Just because,
that'll be an interesting one. I will say my girlfriend is like a huge Flanagan fan, and like
same.
is like that's like the next movie. She's like, when is that coming out? But yeah,
And I feel like
it'll
he just,
be interesting if that like becomes, it's Neon's definitely marketing that is like, this is Stand By Me. It's
yeah,
Shawshank Redemption. This is pull on your heartstrings, Stephen King, not
yeah,
horror Stephen King, and that'll be interesting to see if that pans out. I've
yeah. And plus, as somebody who also likes Mike Flanagan, I feel like he's been on the verge for
mhm.
so long. And I need this to do well so that he can finally get to do the Dark Tower. um, but also, the next thing he has on board is an Exorcist movie, and not to count out Flanagan, right? But I would much rather his breakthrough be for something like Life of Chuck than like
Yeah.
another Exorcist movie. The big question mark, as somebody who's read the story it's based on,
Hmm.
is how audiences are going to feel about how the film plays out.
I've heard it is weird, for lack of a better
It's
word, or it is
it's
unconventional
weird.
in the way that it
It's
is told.
unconventional. It's a little metaphysical. And so I think people who are just looking for like a Shawshank or
Hmm.
something, um, may be surprised at what they get. Hopefully, not disappointed in what they
Yeah.
get.
And yet it won the audience award at TIFF,
Right
which is
there, you go.
usually like is less a badge of quality and more of a badge of sort of like a certain type of crowd pleaser, if that
Yeah,
makes sense, of a sort of like feel good
true.
movie. So I don't know, that's a good pick. Mine that I'm gonna throw out, it's a big summer for horror movies. There's a lot of kind
Hmm.
of horror Lego sequels and stuff. I'm gonna throw my chips down for Weapons, the Zach Kreger movie,
Uh,
the guy who made Barbarian. There's only like a little teaser about this movie that's been out. It seems like Warner Brothers is going to kind of market this and sort of maybe similar to kind of the way Neon marketed Longlegs last
okay.
summer, of being a sort of like, let's slowly like trickle out stuff. It's coming out in August, so like near the end of the summer, where usually like there's plenty of room for like an August movie to kind of like
Yeah,
surprise and clean up.
not a lot of
but
competition.
but yeah, I think horror movies are usually like pretty easy layups if they're good. And Barbarian, Kreger's first movie, was kind of this real word of mouth success.
It was a
And
lot of fun too.
yeah, and so I could see if Warner Brothers markets this in a similar way as to Barbarian, and this becomes a kind of like word of mouth hit. I really know nothing about it. It seems to involve like missing children, and
Hmm.
that's all I really know about it.
When
But
I heard, like, I've made it a point not to read anything because the first thing I heard was Magnolia but horror, and I was like, I'm done, I'm out.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
no, I
I
don't need
know
to
I
hear
know
anything
Josh
else.
Brolin and Julia
Garner,
Garner
yeah,
are in it. But that is one where I'm like, I I could sense a sort of late summer kind of like word of mouth hit in a similar way to like, was Barbarian, was that a summer, because I didn't see it like until months after it came out, so I can't
and it
totally
was one of
remember. but
those.
but
It
but
was
another
also one of
similar
those that
like word of mouth, like people just saying like, you got to go see this. Like I can't spoil it for you, but like you need to see this and have some sort of like mystery hook to it.
I think most of that audience found it on Max
Okay,
later.
that's where I watched
So,
it.
same here. And so that may be a big question mark on this too, is how many people watch this at home, loved it, but they're not really accounted for in the
Yeah,
financial stuff. How many of those are going to be like, "Oh, it's the Barbarian guy," and go out to
yeah.
see it? So, yeah, hey, I'd be super happy if that, you know, if that was the case as well. So,